Who was there? Anybody there yesterday? Oh, great. A little long. The racing secretary, some of the speeches went a little bit longer than they should. Thank you, does not mean 12 minutes worth of thank you. But anyway, so he came up to me and said, okay, they're all going to miss the double, but just tell people to bet the late pick 4. And we also have the Hall of Fame is in the building. It's a separate entity, actually. And we're not going to spend too much time there. I urge you to spend your time there. It'll be our last stop along the way today. So let's go. Let's just get started. You do, especially don't talk. So if you want to swing around this way just a little bit. In this gallery, these are pictures by a guy named, let's get it backwards, Smithson Broadhead. I always want to call him Broadhead Smithson, but Smithson Broadhead, English painter. And this is Nashua, the winner of the Preakness and Belmont Stales in 1955. These are his very patrician owners. This is his groom, whose name I do not know. How many of you guys are like really horsey?
I aspire
around horses and stuff. Okay. So I always like to point out that the groom's on the left-hand side of the horse. All horses are handled from the left-hand side, from birth, basically. The grooms and the outriders and the jockeys get up on the left side. The reason is, going way back when, people had their swords over here. So if they got on the horse from the right-hand side, two things were going to happen. The horse was going to get stabbed in the belly, and the butt of the sword was going to wind up in the guy's crotch. Two very bad. This is Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons, the trainer of Nashua, and his jockey, Eddie Arcaro. Eddie Arcaro, maybe the greatest of our century, our last century. He won more Triple Crown races than anybody. 5 derbies, 6 Preaknesses, 6 Belmont Stales, and the Preakness and the Belmont with him. The artist, very clever fellow, by the way, and a beautiful artist. Look at the detail and vivid expression here of Nashua, the vascular structure, the skeletal structure, the muscles, the shiny coat, the bright eye, beautifully detailed, and the focus of these very much in focus. And the little artist trick is that they put everything in the background a little out of focus. This is the paddock at Saratoga, you will probably recognize. Over here, I take up a lot of space. And this is Gridley Avenue, which runs right alongside that fence, is still there. So here's Eddie, he's bent over a little bit like this because he's speaking with Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons. Late in his life, Sonny Jim was all bent over. He had a terrible malady, and he walked around like this. He couldn't really stand up straight at all. So he's seated in this picture. He started his career, his first win was in the year 1900. His last was in the year 1963. He's the only guy who have ever trained 2 Triple Crown winners, Gal Fox and Omaha. And in the tour today, we're going to throw out a lot of trivia about Man of War, because we're celebrating his 100th birthday this year. He was the underbidder on Man of War. He went up for $4,500 and didn't go the extra 500 and didn't get the horse. He was also the first trainer of Seabiscuit. He couldn't do a thing with him, basically gave him away. But other than that, he was a pretty damn good trainer. Here's Nashua, more about him in a second. Here are the very patrician owners of Nashua, Mr. and Mrs. William Woodward Jr. Woodward Sr. Was a very wealthy man. He was the owner of the Manufacturers Hanover Bank. He was involved in politics and diplomacy. He was on the cover of Time magazine. This is William Woodward Jr. and his wife, Anne. They didn't particularly get along. They both liked to drink, and my friend is nodding their head here. And they would argue from time to time, and she shot him dead. Come home. Well, you know, it must have been something he said. I don't know. But you know, they were coming home from a party, and at Wallace Simpson's house, actually, the famous divorcee of the former King of England, and or the would-be King of England, I guess. And anyway, so there was a guy stumbling around the hall. She just happened to have a shotgun at her side and shot him dead. She claimed that she thought he was a burglar. Rightly or wrongly, I don't know. There was no charges ever filed, but a lot of people don't buy the story. If you've ever seen the movie or read the book by Dominic Dunn, The Two Mrs. Grenvilles, that's that story, and was also a book by Truman Capone called Answered Prayers. Nashua was a great horse, and you can't tell the story of Nashua without telling the story of Swaps. There were 3-year-olds of 1955, and again, this artist being a very clever fellow, this is the silks, their farm was the Bel Air Stud. This is still there in Maryland? In Bel Air, Maryland? No, I guess it's a shopping mall now, actually. But it goes back to the colonial time, very, very old farm, and their silks were red and white. And so the artist, this being 1955, has depicted on the street a red 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air. So this is all East Coast, baby. This is old-time East Coast, all the way up and down. Champion of the West was Swaps. He won everything in sight out there, as well as Nashua winning everything in sight out here. So comes time for the Kentucky Derby, and Swaps wins. Comes time for the Preakness of the Belmont, Swaps has tender feet and does not run. So they meet in the middle of the country in a great match race in Chicago, $100,000, take all. The people in California, they love Swaps, and he was so antithetical to this whole East Coast setup. He was owned by a cowboy and trained by a cowboy, and the folks out there, they loved him. They called him the California Comet. And the East Coasters didn't care for him, and because he demurred in the 2 legs of the Triple Crown, they called him the California Cripple. So they have this great match race, and Sonny Jim tells Arcaro, I don't care what you do, because this guy knows that almost all match races are won by horses that go to the front. I don't care what you do, Arcaro, you get that horse, and you send him to the front, everything you got to do to get him there. And he does. And Nashua wins. Nashua was not a front runner. After the race was over, Arcaro says, I can't do this anymore. I've got to be more tired than Nashua. Another clever piece that the artist puts in here, he's very sure to paint Arcaro in the Arcaro in profile. And the main reason for that is he wants you to see really how big his nose is. His nickname was the Schnoz, or Old Banana Nose. So again, any questions you guys have about it? Oh, I tell you another thing too. Swaps, it comes up to the East Coast the following year and fractures hind leg. And he was in Maryland at the time. And the horses need to stand because of their digestive system. That's why it's so serious when a horse breaks a leg, that they might not survive. So Sonny Jim hears of this, and he invents a sling that's to be hung from the top of the stall for Swaps. And he will be able to be upright and thus be able to digest. And he invents this, sets it down, crafts it, and his great rival saved his life. This is Stephen Sanford, the opening stakes for 2-year-olds in Saratoga. It's the Sanford Stakes. It's actually technically the Stephen Sanford Memorial Stakes. He was a United States congressman, and importantly owned the Mohawk Carpet Weaving Company, the largest in America. And he also owned a farm, which was called the Hurricane Farm. Both were located in Amsterdam. Are any local folks here in the crowd today? Yeah, well, you know where Amsterdam is, you know, and it's, I know the exact distance is 27 miles from here, because the day before the Saratoga meeting every year, he took all of his racehorses and walked them from Amsterdam to the stables here at Saratoga. The stables are still there. If you go down Nelson Avenue, they're on the harness side of the track. They're very steep roofed and really cool looking buildings. They were state of the art at the time. They had apartments in there and kitchens for the help and everything. And also on opening day, everybody, and 2,500 of them, everybody that worked at the carpet mill got the day off so they could go to the track. His son is John Sanford. This is about 1905. I think those stables over there about 1905 as well, I imagine. There's a crumpled up New York Times here, and I don't know why. In every portrait, there's stuff, and there's a reason for every element in every portrait. He must have been mad at the times, I don't know, but that's there, and I don't know why. So his son, John, is a horse breeder as well. His son, John, actually breeds and owns the winner of the 1916 Derby, George Smith. John marries a woman that is no relation to him. Her name is Ethel Sanford, and of course they get married in Sanford, Florida. They had a pretty famous daughter, actually. Her name was Gertrude. She married a fellow named Legendre. She was captured in World War II, and she escaped and became a spy. And she was also a big game hunter. She became a very famous individual. Anybody familiar with the movie Holiday? Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn? No, not Audrey. Is it Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn played the role of his daughter. Oh, so the only race, by the way, Man of War ever lost was the Sanford. Man of War won 20 of his 21 races. And the horse that beat him was a horse called Upset. The race was started, at that time there were no starting gates. They had, it was kind of looked like a tennis net stretched across the track. And it was on a spring that the starter would pull. And the horses just had to get in line and kind of keep straight. And then the starter would spring the latch and up it would go and off they'd run. So the starter that day, Mars Cassidy, this is in 1919, is sick, can't do the job, so they get one of the placing judges to do it because the placing judge had been a starter at one time. The reason he wasn't a starter anymore was because the last race he tried to start, it took him 90 minutes. They had 40 recalls. So anyway, this inexperienced fellow is at the start, and Man of War is there, and Man of War goes like this, and he springs the latch. So Man of War got in trouble twice in the race. Well, I got to tell you about this guy here. For nothing else, just to say his name, Sir Tregonwell Frampton. And he's known as the father of the turf. I've seen 3 portraits of him. One is an English fellow around mid-1700s and through there. And there are 3 portraits of him. One is in the British Museum in London. Of the 3 portraits, I can tell you that this portrait is by far the most flattering. Not an attractive man. But he did a lot of stuff. He's a very interesting man and quite a character. He was sort of like the racing secretary at Newmarket. He was the guy that kind of got things rolling at Newmarket. Newmarket's about an hour from London. Anybody ever been over there, actually? Yeah, okay. And so Newmarket is the training center for thoroughbred racing over there. Newmarket has a great track, of course. And back in the 1700s, it was kind of a getaway place for the landed gentry. And he was sort of like the racing secretary. He would arrange races. These were match races mostly at the time. He was also a trainer. He was also a jockey, significant of the whip here. And he did a lot of other stuff. And he was a gambler, more than anything else. You see a dog in here. He arranged for some sporting events called hare coursing, and people bet on that. There was a rabbit and a bunch of hounds that chased him, and you can imagine what happened if you bet on the rabbit and he lost. There's also a rooster here, and he arranged cockfights. And of course, in reference to racing here. There's also a flower in here, and I'm not exactly sure what the significance of that is. As I mentioned, he did love to bet, and he fostered this wagering, and the betting got so crazy over there on these races that Parliament had to step in, and they passed a law, the Gaming Act of 17 whatever, and you couldn't bet more than 10 pounds on any event. Now, before that law went into effect, it was eventually rescinded not too long later. Before that, he arranged a match for a horse of his called Dragon, and there was another fellow that had a very good mare, the best in England at the time. So they arranged for a race, and Dragon beats the mare. So the guy that owns the mare says, okay, fine, I got the best mare in the country, and I can, and Dragon was a colt, by the way. And he said, I'll bet anybody 10,000 that my mare can beat any horse in England that's not a colt. And Dragon, well, so I'll take you up on that. So he comes back a couple weeks later with Dragon, who he gelded. And he won, yes. Oh, excuse me. You're taking pictures always like this? I'm just going to have you.
Absolutely, absolutely. No worries.
This is Newmarket, assuming that's the winning post. At that time, this is 1750-ish again. There was probably a grandstand of some sort, nothing like what we know. But the best way to watch these races was on horseback. So you see the folks on horseback, they just follow the horses going around. They're generally long match races, 3 or 4 miles or whatever. Or Derby, well, Derby, D-E-R-B-Y, they pronounce it in England, Derby. And in the spring that year, they wanted to have 2 races for 3-year-old colts and another race for 3-year-old fillies. So there was another great patron at that time, Lord Bunbury, his name was. So comes time, and they both want to sponsor the race for the colts. So they flip a coin, and he wins. Now, if he loses the toss of that coin, first Saturday in May, you and I are going to the Kentucky Bunbury. Fortunately, Lord Derby/Darby wins it. Now, Bunbury gets to name the race for the fillies, and thankfully he does not name it after himself, but he named it after his farm, the Oaks. So that's why we have the Kentucky Oaks and the Coaching Club American Oaks. And again, don't be afraid to ask any questions. Again, this is where we keep some of our very best pictures. These are 3 of one of my favorites by Sir Alfred Munnings. He was born in 1880, English fellow. He was unable to go to battle in World War I. He was too frail, so he was put in charge of staging horses for battle, getting them into the conflict and training them for that. 8 million horses died in World War I. 8 million, far more than the number of people. It wasn't for lack of effort, though. They did set up triage, veterinary triage stations out in the battlefield, but just the nature of that caused, they did save several 100,000, but unfortunately couldn't save 8 million. This is very different than the picture that we saw of Nashua. There's not that real fine detail in the horses. It's even fanciful. I mean, I don't know, I've never even seen a horse that color, or these colors in particular. He wasn't interested in that real detail. He was more interested in giving you the feeling of the pent-up power and the dynamic motion, particularly at the start of a race. That became a motif for many of his paintings. And these 3 are all that. And also, the backgrounds are also very drab. It's not, that really doesn't take away from what he really wants to convey with his power, but it also adds to lighten up the colors of the jockey silks. These are very valuable paintings. Munnings went for 8 million at sale. That was the most expensive Munnings, and so please don't steal them. Now, if you, you're on in this picture, I saw. If you're going to steal it, don't take it off the wall in the frame. because the alarm will go off. The way you steal it is to get a knife and then you cut. Roll it up. These two pictures. How many of you have ever heard of a horse called Exterminator? Oh, you read the book? Oh, good. Good, great story. This is Exterminator, and this is his stablemate, Sunbriar. These two paintings are by Frank Voss, and we are lucky to have with us today Mimi Voss. Mimi is the wife of our dearly-departed Tom Voss, who just died, I guess, less than 2 years ago. Yesterday, he was inaugurated and inducted into the Hall of Fame as this great steeplechase trainer that he was. He was a great trainer on the flat. He was his great uncle, I think, right? Yep. And I'm going to have to talk to Frank about this. This says Exterminator, painted at Saratoga in 1922. I know that's Exterminator, and I know that's not Saratoga. So to tell you the story of these two horses, let's start with Sunbriar, who was the champion of 1917, two-year-old champion of 1917. And he was the apple of the eye of the owner of both these horses, a guy named Willis Kilmer. More about him in a minute. Exterminator was purchased for the sole purpose of prompting the stable star in his workhouse. That was it. That was the only reason they bought Exterminator. He was a gigantic horse. That's why his name was Exterminator. When he was born, the groom said, "Man, this horse is going to exterminate everybody." Very tall, very bony. His nickname would become Old Bones. He also had, one guy called him a galloping hat rack. And the galloping Abe Lincoln, because he was just so tall and by their way of thinking, not that attractive. But pretty as pretty does. He won 50 races. And this was the greatest distance horse of the 20th century. He won the Saratoga Cup 4 times, a mile 3/4 race, which at that time was every bit the equal of certainly the Whitney, well, there was no Whitney at that time, I guess, and the Travers. It was just the race to win. He won it 4 times. If you look across the hall here in our trophy museum, on the cabinet on the back, has those four trophies that Exterminator won. So he's owned by a guy named Willis Kilmer. Willis Kilmer made a fortune selling something called swamp root. He claimed it could cure anything from bunions to bronchitis. He said it was particularly good at fixing diseases of the liver. I don't think so, because swamp root was 9% alcohol.
Just saying.
He's the reason we have the FDA today, the Food and Drug Administration, because he was such a crook selling this stuff that didn't do anything. One guy asked him, he said, what is swamp root good for? And he says, about $2 million a year. So, coming up to the Kentucky Derby, here's the 2-year-old champion. Gets sick, can't compete. He's down there in Louisville prompting him, and the trainer says, well, why don't we put him in? We're here. And Willis Kilmer says, I won't let that goat wear my silks. He was talked into it, and you know the rest of the story, of course. He wins the Kentucky Derby at odds of 30-1. So they come back. Here we are now in the Travers of 1918. So we get the winner of the Derby, the winner of the Preakness Warplow, the winner of the Belmont Stakes, Joe Rand, and the 2-year-old champion, Sunbriar. The 4 of them meet. Sunbriar wins the race, but that's not the most important thing that happened on that day. 2 hours after the Travers, they had a sale in the paddock, and Man of War was sold. I just want you to take a look at, by the way, Exterminator really was one of the greats, and he had a long career. He was a gelding, and the fact that he was so good, they wanted to get a match race between him and Man of War at the time, but the They couldn't get together on the distance. Man of War, they claimed didn't want to run farther than a mile and a quarter. He didn't want to run so short. But just take a look at how these jockeys are riding. This is 1885 or something like that, 1885. And very long stirrups. And I'm going to comment on that in about 7.5 minutes. Forego, he was, unfortunately for him, he was foal of the same year as Secretariat. He finished 4th in that Kentucky Derby. This is one of the last great weight carriers, a handicap horse. I'll just assume that you folks know something about a handicap race. The horses in that race are assigned weights to carry, and the better horses have to carry more weight. For instance, well, I'll get to that in a minute, but it's the jockey's weight plus the weight of the saddle that has to come up to the assigned weight. We have the Whitney Stakes today. It was the Whitney Handicap. There are no real handicap races anymore that are of any particular substance because trainers don't want their good horses to carry this heavy weight. This horse, Forego, a foal in 1970, carried 130 pounds on 24 different occasions. 130 pounds or more on 24 different occasions. That's never going to happen again. Now, the Whitney was a handicap. It's now a stakes race, and they measure the weight that you have to carry by the amount of races you won or stakes races or whatever. Gun Runner's the big favorite today. He's carrying, what's he, 124 today maybe? 124. And, oh, and by the way, you need to root, but don't bet on. I don't want you to ruin the price of Breaking Lucky, because I'm part owner. But I think he's in with 117 pounds. Now, Gun Runner is much better than just 7 pounds more, but that's just the way of the world these days. In the 1975 Marlboro Cup, Forego, which was 1.25 miles, long way, difference carrying a heavy weight going short as opposed to having towed it for 1.25 miles. He's assigned 137 pounds. He wins. The horse that he beat was the winner of the Kentucky Derby, Honest Pleasure, who carried 119. That's, how many pounds did he? 18 pounds, 137 to 119. And that over 1.25 miles is just a phenomenal thing. It's something that you'll never see today. His jockey, Bill Shoemaker, quite a character himself, weighed 91 pounds. He was a really small guy. When he was born, he weighed 38 ounces. Really tiny baby. And his grandmother literally put him in a shoebox and laid him outside on the oven door and acted as kind of an incubator and saved his life. So he never grew up to be my size, for instance. So he's carrying 91 pounds. He is 91 pounds. He's assigned 137. That means his saddle's got to be 41 pounds? 46 pounds. 46 pounds. That's half his body weight. To get off the horse and carry the saddle to the weighing station, he required his groom to help him carry all the weight. I interviewed him years later when he was on a retirement tour. And so before we got on camera, I said, oh, you know, Bill, he was 55, which at that time was just totally unheard of. And I said, you know, one of the questions I'm going to ask you about your motivation, because, you know, why are you just doing all this hard work over all these years, been in big money races since the 1940s, and you know, what's your motivation to keep on working? And he paused and he looked at me and said, Tom, you've never been divorced, have you? He won the Triple Crown. It had nothing to do with his breeding or his jockey or his training or his own ability even. The reason he won the Triple Crown was because of me. Oh. Thank you. I walked into that announcer's booth 9 times, hoping that at the end of the day, I was going to have called a Triple Crown winner. Yeah. 9 times. Silver Charm, Charismatic, you know, Big Brown,
Marty Jones,
Marty Jones, on and on, War, whatever. 0 for 9. So I've got 2 years left on my contract, or 1 extra year, and so I go to the boss, Chris Kay, over there. I said, Chris, you know, I'm just not feeling it, and I think I'd rather retire a year early than a year too late. And usually in the springtime, I'm really up and raring to go, and I just, you know, just don't have the fire in the belly anymore. He tried to talk me out of it, but he was nice enough to let me out. So as soon as I get out and I don't walk into that announcer's booth, Larry walks in and calls the first Triple Crown winner in 30 years. But it makes no difference to me. I mean, the only difference is I can't put on my tombstone, here lies the guy that called Triple Crown. Sorry?
Did you call Smarty Jones?
I thought, yes, and I thought Smarty Jones was going to win by so much. He was given a horrible ride. The 3rd quarter in that race was 22-1, but he ran awful in a 1.5-mile race. I was so sure he was going to win. The night before the race, I took out one of those surveyor's wheels that tell you how far things are, and I marched off the distance of equivalent to 31 links. I marched on the rail. I took a little piece of red tape and I put it on the rail, thinking that if he wins by more than 31 lengths, which was the record that Secretariat set, if he wins by more than 31 lengths, I can see that and I can call it and make myself look like a genius. Yeah. I talked about a fellow named Todd Sloan. He didn't invent this style, which is called the monkey crouch, but he did popularize it in the late 1890s. He was the greatest jockey in the land. In 1897, he won 46% of his races. Todd Sloan was a star. He goes over, now again, a lot of American jockeys were starting to ride like this back then. He did not invent it, but he certainly popularized this type of riding. So he goes over to England to see more fame and fortune, big money to be won over there, and you know, those guys are riding around like they're in the Shriner Circus, you know, and it's like this, and it's just wiping up. So he won so many races over there that the English gentry, you know, who were in charge of the racing at the time, didn't particularly care for this upstart from the democracy across the way. So he was accused of betting on his own horse, which he may have done. He probably did, but everybody did it at the time. It was a very common practice at the time for jockeys to bet on their own horses. Now at this time, all jockeys over there and here, the jockey club of either country had to renew your license as a jockey every year. Comes the next year, and the English Jockey Club refuses to give him a license. They don't even have to give a reason. They just say, you're done. Comes back to America, he cannot ride in America because the American Jockey Club has a reciprocal agreement with the English Jockey Club. At the age of 26, the greatest jockey in the world is out of business, never rode again. He had a one-man show on vaudeville, not very successful. Anybody here ever been to a bar in Paris called Harry's New York Bar? It's a real famous service trip. Anyway, he opened that up way back when. He had a friend, a very good friend named Oscar Hammerstein. And Oscar Hammerstein wrote all those great musicals way back in the day. So he wrote a musical called Little Johnny Jones, which was the life story of Todd Sloan. It became a movie. Jimmy Cagney playing the role of Todd Sloan. The name of the movie was Yankee Doodle Dandy, and you know the song, Yankee Doodle went to London just to ride the ponies. Oh boy. Very sad story though, he died, broke at a very young age. A little bit about the history of racing in America, the North and the South. Horse racing was much more popular in the South prior to the Civil War. And not as popular after all the problems that followed the Civil War. Here was one of the first great American sires. His name was Boston, great racehorse and a great sire. Soon after he retired as a racehorse, he went blind. He sires the greatest sire of the 1800s, Lexington. Lexington was a champion sire 13 times, and 9 of the first 15 winners of the Travers Stakes were sired by Lexington. Lexington goes blind. Now, the guy that owns Lexington doesn't want anybody to know that he's blind, because who's going to breed their mare to a blind horse? Who's by a blind horse? You're going to get a blind horse. But none of his progeny were blind that we know of. In 2007, or a little bit prior to that, a vet looks at this picture and notices, this is by Edward Troy, there's the fellow there, the best horse portraitist of the 1800s. And he has, accurately portrayed this eye, the blind eye. The vet looks and he goes, I recognize this as an illness of the eye. Not being so horsey, I've forgotten the name of this particular illness, malady of the eye. So Lexington is exhumed, and they do necropsy, and they find out, yeah, it was not genetic, that it was this bacterial problem, and that solved that crime. Then they put him back in his grave, and he's pretty happy about that right now. Anybody been to Lexington, Kentucky? And you go around town and you see those, well, you guys are horse racing fancy. If you go around town, you'll see those blue signs that direct you to the various points of interest, whatever. That's this picture. That's this very picture. And you'll notice that the horse is blue, so they just painted him blue for, I guess it's the bluegrass or whatever. But this is a pretty famous picture of a famous horse. Here's a guy. He also did this picture of Glencoe, who was a great sire of fillies. He was a great sire of colts, a great sire of fillies. I think he had like 425 foals, something like 300, and some of them were fillies. For some reason or other, he just sired a lot of fillies, and his fillies were good. Sway back, this is him at a very advanced age. Sway back, it happens to older horses more often to mares as they get on because of the pregnancies. There's a certain amount of gravity here. But this is not the bones so much, it's that the muscles that kind of hold up those bones kind of deteriorate and loosen up with age. But swaybacks can run a little bit. You're not going to spend $8 million on them in a sale, but sometimes it doesn't affect their ability to run. All right, going down this way. A few, but not everybody. There's basically no mention of the name John Morrissey in the museum, although there is a book about him now in the gift shop. John Morrissey built Saratoga Racecourse. He was the guy. Now, one of the reasons that you don't hear a lot about him in certain circles is because he was a pretty rough character. He was very good with his fists to the point that he became the heavyweight champion of the United States. And he used his fists to make a little money working for the Tammany Hall political gang. And basically what he did for them, if you didn't vote for the Tammany Hall candidates, they sent him over to your house. He did have to go to jail for assault and armed robbery. And he did go to the New York State Senate and served a couple terms there, as many criminals do. That's the truth, on many levels. So he opened up a little gambling shop down in New York City. They kind of let him do that because they own the cops. And then he, like many tens and thousands of New Yorkers, came up here in the 1860s to take the waters, get some good fresh air. You don't want to get out of New York City in the summertime. It was a bad place to be at that time.
Still
the waters, yeah, diphtheria. You don't even want to go there now, actually. Anyway, so he comes up here and he opens up a little shop over on Woodlawn Avenue now. And then he realizes these folks got nothing to do in the afternoon. There was a little gambling going on involved here at that time, but it wasn't crazy. And so he decides, how about having a horse racing meeting? So he gets these horses together in 1863, and on the site of Oklahoma now, you can still see the vestiges of that track. It was an old harness track. And he has a horse racing meeting there. It's a giant success. makes all sorts of money in just 2 days, goes and needs to buy the property across the street, 120 some acres. So he didn't have that kind of money, but he had enough. But he got a couple partners. But what he needed more was a sense of decorum, because he had such a bad reputation. So as a partner and as a front man, he hires William Travers, who was a very distinguished stockbroker, highly regarded in New York in many circles. He's the president, and of course on opening day he gets to name the feature race after himself, the Travers, which was won by his horse, a horse called Kentucky. Another partner is Leonard Jerome, a very successful businessman in New York City, built many of the subways there. If you're familiar with the Bronx, there is Jerome Avenue. Jerome Avenue was the street that took you to his racetrack, Jerome Park. There were 2 racetracks at that time in the Bronx. This is 1870. And the reason they were built was because of Saratoga and the great success. There really wasn't that much horse racing going on in New York area at the time. This is August Belmont. The Belmont Stakes is named after August Belmont. He was one of the proprietors of Morris Park. The Belmont Stakes was first run at Morris and then at Jerome, before it was later moved to Belmont Park. And this Belmont Park is named after his son, August Belmont II. He built Belmont Park in 1905, so Belmont Park is named after him. Belmont Stakes is named after his dad. This is the first owner of Man of War. And anybody familiar with the Cape Cod Canal? There's a big canal that goes up through there, okay. Well, he built it, and he lost a lot of money doing it. So he had to sell off some of his horses. This is in 1917, and he needs some money, and he's going off to war. He's going off to fight the Germans for America in World War I. He accepted an officer's rank at the age of 64, and he goes off to war. That's why Man of War's name is Man of War. His wife named it after him. And again, he was very successful owner of racehorses over the years. This is, I'm not going to sit on this. This is how they used to weigh the jockeys. If you're into an Anglophile of any sort, you might know that 1 stone equals 14 pounds. Okay, so this is an English contraction. So this has pounds here, okay, and up to 14. So that's 1 stone, and here are the stones, 23 from 0 to 23. The reason that horses carry 126 pounds in the Kentucky Derby and why it's such a common number is because it's evenly divisible by 14. 9 stone is 126 pounds. 10 stone would have been 140 pounds. It's a little bit too much weight to carry. 8 stone would have been 112, I think, and that wouldn't have been quite enough. So 9 times 14 is 126, and you know, 5,000 years later, that's what the weight for horses in the Kentucky Derby is. Match race, and the final race in Man of War's career, it's Man of War. This is Sir Barton, who was a great racehorse. The first winner of a Triple Crown before it was even known as a Triple Crown. This is how different times are. He wins the Kentucky Derby, and 4 days later travels from Louisville to Baltimore. I don't even know how in 19 you can travel that far in 4 days, and wins the Preakness.
Wow.
4 days after the Kentucky Derby. Anybody ever heard of Kenilworth Racetrack? Okay, not too many. These guys never heard of it, actually. It was a very small track in Canada across the way from Detroit. So if you look at those PPs that we gave you of Man of War, his last race was this. And look at the purse, $75,000 plus a $5,000 gold cup designed by Louis Tiffany. Compare that to the other purses he was running for. So the guy that owns this little backwater track, a guy named Gabe Orpin, thinks he can make money if he puts up $75,000 and fancy gold cup. And he can get these 2 horses. They wanted Exterminator in there too. didn't quite happen. So they get these two, and sure enough, he wound up making money. The admission was $5, a lot of money back in 1920, and 22,000 people showed up. So we wound up making money. Man of War wins. They wanted to get a world record out of it to make it even a greater event. So they pounded down the track beforehand. Unfortunately, Sir Barton kind of had tender feet and didn't respond as well. And if we have a chance, we're going to be able to see this race, the actual film of the race. So this is Man of War's final race. We talked about weight earlier before. So he retires as a 3-year-old, and Walter Vosberg was the great handicapper racing secretary at the time. And so his owner, Sam Riddle, asked him, if we run next year, how much weight are you going to have to assign him in his first race? Because then they start running these handicap races. Walter Vosberg told him 147 pounds. And he said, no thanks, we're going to stud. And he wound up being truly one of the great studs. Always one of my favorites. I called her first winner, I think it was 1980, at a little track, Tampa Bay Downs. She lied about her age. She was only 15. And I remember the horse very distinctly. He was a funny old horse. His name was Lord Farkle, big gelding that just kind of plopped along, and she was just on the ride. She was always a character. And what she used to do was, when she got back to the winner's circle, she'd stand on the back of the horse and do a flip off into the winner's circle, long before Frankie Dettori or Angel Cordero. Here's the very beautiful Robin Smith. She was not a very good jockey, but she had a very good boyfriend in Alfred Vanderbilt, who managed to get her some, yeah, Mimi's nodding, she knows it. She wound up marrying Fred Astaire, actually, in time. And I did a couple broadcasts with her. She's a really very nice person. She took it, she didn't know what to do after Fred died, so she took one of those tests to tell you what you should be doing, occupational therapy test or whatever it is. And they told her you should be an airplane pilot, so that's what she did. Excuse me, Man of War's grandson. So Seabiscuit is on, that's Pimlico, and it looks a lot better then than it does now, I can tell you that. And here's Clem McCarthy. Oh, where are the old timers? People back then didn't think twice about running off the track or hanging over the. Can you imagine people doing that now? Yeah. All right, so here's, so we just talked about that big match race between those two horses, and I want you to come over, if you can, just take a peek. This is one of the tickets that they sold for $5, and this was the $5,000 gold trophy that they awarded to the winner of the race, which of course is Man of War. If you look inside, on the inside is the names of every Travers winner since 1920. This trophy is awarded to the winner of the Travers Stakes every year, the Man of War Cup. It's supposed to be given away by a member of the Riddle family, but I just haven't seen that for quite a few years at this point. But you don't get to keep this trophy. It kind of stays here. What you do get to keep is a smaller version of it. And this is it. This was Arts and Letters trophy. Man of War. Well, after the race is over, you know, they're all excited and they go back to the stall. And actually, if you take a look, one of these pictures coming up here, they wanted Man of War to drink from the cup. And they got a picture of it. And then a vet looks at Man of War and realizes that he's sore, lame in his back leg, probably from running over that hard track. And so there's a big commotion, and they take him out of the stall, and the vet takes a look at him and determines that, you know, he'll be fine. He's just sore. So then they go, okay, let's go back to the hotel and have a party, and we're going to drink punch out of the strong punch out of the cup. So they go back to the hotel, and okay, well, where's the cup? I thought you had the cup. No, I thought you had the cup. There's no cup. So they backtrack and they find it was underneath some straw in Man of War's skull. But here's some of the. This is our Man of War, in case you haven't figured it out yet. Exhibit. He had all these sponsorship deals, endorsements. This is Man of War for Mobil Oil. And it says, congratulations, Man of War, as one great former to another, the Flying Red Horse wishes you the very best on your 25th birthday. And his name, Man of War's nickname was Big Red. And there it is. This is his owner, Sam Riddle, and that's his trainer, Louis Fustel. But he had these deals. He had a deal for chewing tobacco. Here is Man of War quick drying correction fluid. And here he is. He's on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post, biggest magazine of the era, in 1941. He's 30 years old or something like that at that point. So he was a very famous figure in American sports for a long time. And he's buried, well, he was buried at the faraway farm, which became Sam Riddle's farm. And then he was exhumed and put in another grave at the Kentucky Horse Farm. And when he died, they had a funeral for him. It seems so grotesque. They had a funeral for him. It was aired on NBC radio. They had people singing, tributes to him and whatever. They had a casket for him. They embalmed him and stuffed him, and he had this casket built for him. All right, here's the big race. Now, when they go around the second time, I want you to make sure that you take a look at this area of the film. Over here, there's Man of War, and you're going to see people just like run on the track. All right, coming on the first time, there's Man of War, and Sir Barton giving futile chase, as an old announcer friend of mine would say. So look over here when they come turn into the stretch the first time, people are just going to run out there.
Where was this run, Tom?
Kenilworth Racing Horse, yes. There they go. Look at this. Get out of the way. And now look how easy Man of War went. This is against the Triple Crown winner. Now, he was voted the #1 horse of the 20th century. Secretary was voted second. I'm not going to put a knock on Man of War, but Man of War was a full of 1,960. And Secretary was a full that year of 40,000. So, big difference in the numbers in competition. Find a race that's easier. Classic. This is, the date is, I can tell you, it's etched in my memory, November 10th, 1984. It's the first $3 million race ever. The guys that owned this horse Wild Again were mad gamblers. He went off at odds of
50.
Was it 50 or 30? I don't know.
It was high.
Yeah.
Because I had Wild
Oh,
Again,
then you would know.
I had the other one. The one that
Gate Dancer Slough.
I had Gate Dancer, unfortunately.
They put up $350,000 to put the horse in the race, and he was going to win. I think the winner's share was less than 50%. Let's just say it was 50%, so that's 1.5 million. They were taking 7-2 on a 50-to-1 shot, but they knew what they were doing, and this is the race that really put Pat Day on the map. Great stretch run. Very quirky horse. Cordero, Pat Day. Oh, that's I really hoped it was Wild Again. This is Concern, who finished second in the Travers Stakes that year to Holy Bull. One of the great performances I've ever seen. And here we go, here's Concern. And he comes from nowhere as ever.
Sire of Preakness.
Oh, Sire of Preakness.
Right.
Listen how bright my voice was 30 years ago.
Wow. Dickie Small?
All right, so let's go on in here.
Right.
Rachel Alexander was retired to Stone Street Farm near Lexington, Kentucky. Her first foal, Jess's Dream,
Did they put
named
the
her late owner, Jess
Tom's plaque
Jackson,
up here yet?
won his career debut
Oh, there it is.
as
Was it? Oh, good. Excellent. Oh, terrific.
second foal.
This is the plaque for Mimi's husband, Tom Voss. Terrific, terrific trainer. So this is the
After Rachel
Hall of Fame
Alexander's
itself,
electrifying Woodward victory.
all the plaques of the trainers and jockeys and horses are enshrined in here. There are no owners or breeders in this room. These are the guys that came up with the idea of the Hall of Fame and the museum back in 1950, I guess. And they did not want to build a shrine to themselves. So now many of the not many, but every year they'll put in one of those pillars of the turf. Technically, they're not in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is from here out, and these on the side here are for the pillars of the turf. And these are the inductees for this year, and they'll stay up here for a year and then take a permanent spot inside. So I invite you to come back. There's a film up there that runs on a loop all day long.
With Hall of Fame jockey Mike Smith, who was no
There's a video screen in front. This is not for the faint of heart, I can tell you. Totally out of shape. There are 3 speeds here. Fast, faster, and fastest. And you get in there, you get the silks on and the helmet and everything, and you ride the horse, and you can guide it with the reins. You can actually lean over, and it leans with you and what have you. But it's pretty.